The Miller procedure is an acronym, and it stands for minimally invasive, limited ligation, endovascular assisted revision. Well, every interventionalist who does procedures will come across this problem, where a patient presents with a hyperpulsatile access. You go ahead and you treat the outflow stenosis, and by the time the patient's getting off the table, they're already complaining that their hand is numb and cold. So, as interventionalists, we have to not only address the outflow, but we also have to have a mechanism for addressing the inflow. Banding is a technique which has been around for over 30 years. I made a modification to the procedure that actually made it much more successful. So this is where the arterial anastomosis is. We go as close to the arterial anastomosis without actually being right at the artery, and we look for areas where the access is nice and superficial. You'll notice there's a little bit of a scar here. Sometimes we try to stay away from the scar, but in this case we're going to be forced to go kind of like right on top of it. He has 2 large aneurysms here which have been developing over time, and despite performing angioplasty across the outflow, he continues to have too much flow in the access, and that's why we're going to go ahead and slow it down today. The single biggest problem with sizing the site of banding is you have to understand the physiology. Radius to the 4th power. Flow moves in a tube at a factor of radius to the 4th power. So any 1 millimeter change in diameter will quadruple the flow rates through the tube. So therefore, very tiny incremental changes in the end intraluminal diameter will dramatically change the flow rates. And that's where the angioplasty balloon comes in. We use the angioplasty balloon as a sizing dowel. We position the balloon across the area that we want to perform the banding. And when the balloon is fully inflated, we tie our surgical suture down around the sizing dowel. It gives you a perfectly sized intraluminal diameter every time. The beauty of it is that I use a 2.0 Prolene suture because it has stretch. So if you make a 3 millimeter band for a patient who has a Steele syndrome, or a 4 millimeter band for someone who has a high flow access, you can modify either one simply by taking a 1 millimeter diameter larger balloon and simply stretching it a little bit. The procedure is actually very handy because if something is wrong and the patient's not able to get adequate dialysis treatments because you slowed it too much, you can either stretch it or you can take a bigger balloon and break the band. So it's actually completely undoable.